Shane Black from hookupheadlines.com coming back at y'all today. We're kind of giving you a recap here of the early National Signing Day. This was just in terms of like action going on around the entire like college football recruiting landscape was a pretty wild day, especially if you're like a Oregon or Alabama fan. Not such a great day if you're like a Notre Dame or Baylor or OU fan. But it was pretty fun. It was very busy. No like huge shockers today, but a lot of twists and turns during the afternoon. I haven't had a whole lot of time to get even out of the chair today, so it's been a lot of news, constant stuff. Looking at the phone. So Texas finishes off today, at least, barring something else happening today, which from what Sark and Jeff Choate were saying earlier today, with there being multiple surprises in store for today, that maybe there's something, but I haven't really heard anything. So as far as what happened for Texas today, I guess the two pickups were, maybe this was what Jeff Choate was referring to, was that Gavin Holmes was going to be committing today. But Texas picked up a commitment from Wake Forest transfer Gavin Holmes, redshirt sophomore corner, 2 years of eligibility remaining, and then picked up a commitment from Skyridge, 4-star edge rusher, outside linebacker Cecilia Kana, landed him over OU. I didn't think Holmes was going to be committing today. He had an official visit set up for January 7th and 8th at Penn State. I thought he was at least going to see that through. And then Akana was kind of considered an OU lean heading into today, but there was a lot of mixed information coming out of that. So he ultimately joins the school where his sister is now a reigning volleyball national champion. Before I ramble on too long here, Shane, what are kind of some of your initial thoughts on the class coming out the first signing day?
In general, interesting signing day, a lot of flips. You have the NIL kind of wrinkle thrown into this. A lot of people talking about Phil Knight because of what Oregon did on the trail today. But Texas specific, you mentioned Gavin Holmes. No one really saw that happening today, which kind of threw a wrench into a lot of the work you were doing on the site. But certainly a good pickup. He's going to come in and compete for that field corner spot now that Deshaun Jameson is gone. I know you've done a good amount of film dive on him, so you can break down that a little more. Cecilia Kana, I was watching his commitment. He specifically mentioned the Jack role and the fit in the Texas defense that kind of sold him because, like you said, he was considered an OU lean coming into today. So I think he really sees himself as a guy coming off the edge in this defense. And I think, if he puts on another 20 pounds, he can really be a force. Akana's a guy that I don't think we're going to hear his name much in year one, but he's a guy when 2024 comes around, 2025, he could be a real force on this defense, maybe a double-digit sack type of guy. His versatility is really intriguing to me. I think that's a huge pickup because he's a great player, and you take him away from your rival, Oklahoma. So all in all, I think a pretty solid day for Texas. Hung on to Derek Williams, which is big. And, I think this class shaped up, almost as well as you could have liked. Sitting currently third in the overall rankings, just behind Alabama and Georgia. And you're starting to ask for a little too much if you want to push for, number one with what Alabama did today. So, I think all in all, good class so far from Texas. Hopefully, they feather up the edges with the transfer portal, but job well done from Sark and his staff.
Certainly a job well done from the staff for the entire cycle. You kind of touched on a lot of the things that went on around the national recruiting landscape. And, I think we a little bit got a taste today of, what, actually, I don't know. We weren't in a whole lot of battles with Georgia and Alabama at this point. But, at least you get to see today what recruiting in the SEC can be like. We were in a recruiting battle with LSU, so I guess we got a little bit of that here. LSU ended up landing 4-star tight end Kamorian Pimpton. He chose to flip from Vanderbilt. Chose LSU over Texas and Vanderbilt. I was a little bit surprised by him choosing LSU. I really thought LSU was in third place on that. So that was pretty interesting. But that kind of serves as that'll serve as a transition point a little bit later in the show, because I do want to talk about who is up next, or who could be up next for Texas, who they'll still be pushing for among high school recruits in the 2023 class. You could still see a movement with a couple of guys there. I do want to mention some names to watch, and we can dig into these guys a little bit later when we do kind of predictions of what's next for the 2023 class. But some names to watch: 3-star Pebblebrook. Georgia safety, defensive back, cornerback, pretty versatile. Tyler Scott, he committed today, or committed and signed today, but he won't be announcing his decision until January 7th. Same thing in terms of timeline with 4-star Waco Connolly, athlete / linebacker Jelani McDonald. He signed today. I think that'll end up going Texas's way. There was some talk in some Oklahoma State circles earlier this week that it was kind of a coin flip, but once you started getting more and more out of the official visit, that wasn't an official visit last weekend, right?
I think it counted an OV.
Yeah, I think the unofficial was last month. I think that is going to end up falling in Texas's direction. But I mean, we got, this is kind of my initial thought on the class, is that we got holes at wide receiver that we're going to need to fill, but because DeAndre Moore did not sign today, and I don't know what direction that's going to go at this point. He's still committed to Louisville as we speak. And then, we didn't land Kamorian Pimpton, so he was a guy that could have played kind of that tight end, outside receiver role. And we don't really have anyone now in the 2023 class that can do that right away. Spencer Shannon maybe eventually can be more of a potent receiving threat as a tight end, but not yet. He's going to take some time to develop. But we are deep up front, especially if we end up pulling in Jelani McDonald. I counted a half dozen blue chip signees among linebackers and edge players in this class, which is insane because it seemed like we couldn't land one blue chip linebacker for the longest time, and edge rusher for that matter. Defensive back still, even though we picked up 3 really important signees today with Derek Williams, Malik Muhammad, and Gavin Holmes, you still need more depth there. Texas still going after the Syracuse safety transfer Jahad Carter, so that's a name to watch. I think just in general though, like I'll kind of give my closing thoughts almost on the 2023 class. And we can kind of serve this as a transition point for digging into, I'd like to say, some of the immediate impact guys from this class, but kind of closing thoughts on the entire class. That right now, if you're looking at the 247 Sports composite, it's a top 3 class behind Alabama and Georgia. You mentioned that number 1 seems like a bold endeavor, because I don't know how you would go about doing that. Even landing Deuce Robinson, I don't think gets you over the hump in that regard. I'm fine. I think Texas got a lot of what they needed, and you can fill in a lot of the other spots by way of the portal. I've kind of had this thought for a while where, like, I didn't think that wideout was going to really be maximized for this cycle. I like the class with Ryan Niblett and Jonte Cook, but I don't think it's maximized since you lost out on Jalen Hale a few months ago. So I think since then, I've almost had a focus on the portal exclusively. I like DeAndre Moore. Kyle Parker was a solid option, but I don't know if you're really going to end up getting either of those guys. So I like the way it's looking right now, and this is, in my opinion, will end up being the most complete Texas class that we've had in, at least since I've covered the program. We've had some top 3 classes under Tom Herman, but those kind of ended up fraying.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because, so when Sark gets hired, you think flashy offense, really going to appeal to, the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and, the tight ends, like a Deuce Robinson type. And of course, in this cycle, Texas landed the number one quarterback, the number one running back, and then Jonte Cook, a 5-star receiver. But we've seen more of the real work done in the trenches from the 2 years of Sark. I think it's important to touch on the O-linemen that were added this cycle. What we saw last cycle was really unprecedented with the 7 signees, 2 5-stars in Kelvin Banks and DJ Campbell. This cycle, no 5-stars, no guys in the top really like 100. But, Kyle Flood really goes for players that fit his mold. Big guys who can move, get downfield. And you look, Jaden Chapman, Peyton Kirkland, Connor Stroh, there's names here that they're not going to be guys competing for snaps on day one like a Kelvin Banks, but they're guys who can grow into roles on this offensive line. And I think especially we talk about it, we harp on it, moving into the SEC, you're going to need those big bodies to match up with the defensive lines that you're going to be facing week in and week out. And I really like the idea of just throwing as many solutions at the problem as possible. Because if you look at these last 2 classes, what Texas is bringing in 12 offensive linemen, you got to think that, at least half of them hopefully hit and can be viable starters. And then that kind of solves your offensive line problem and the problem about Longhorns not getting drafted at that position. So I really like what Flood did at the offensive line. I think he's going to be able to develop some of these guys. And even though there's no huge names, I was pleasantly surprised with what has been done at that position.
Kyle Flood's done some excellent work. I mean, this offensive line class isn't as highly touted or as highly rated as the last one because last cycle was just like historic for what Flood did with that group. But I really like, I mean, you mentioned his name. I like Jaden Chapman. There was a point in time when I thought he would be like an immediate impact guy on the interior. I have since switched that opinion. I think maybe in the 2nd or 3rd year he's on campus. I mean, I guess don't rule it out because this offensive line's still going to be young next year, so he could still make an impact. But a lot of the guys in this class I've been high on for a while as developmental pieces. Trevor Goosby's been one of my favorites for a while. I'm a personal fan, too, of Connor Stroh because I think he's got a lot of versatility up front, and he's already huge. So he just keeps getting better. He's on that trend line that you really like. He's played against some pretty high level of competition on a consistent basis. He's performed well at camps. And so you like from a well-rounded perspective, I like that. He's obviously fully committed with the Longhorns. I don't know if there was a single commit in the 2023 class that was more active on social media between him and his mom than, let's just say, the entire Stroh family. So, I mean, I really like the offensive line class. In terms of immediate impact guys, because I'm going to end up having a piece on this later, but Akan has been an interesting one to me because I think that there's a way for him to get involved early on because he's such a polished pass rusher to really just be a kind of a pass rush specialist right away. But Jonte Cook is one that I named because he is probably going to be like the 4th or 5th wide receiver in the rotation next year, I would imagine. Depends on what we end up bringing in through the portal, who ends up coming back. But let's say that like Nayor, Worthy, and Whittington are the starters next year. I think Cook's probably your 4th or 5th guy in that rotation. So still going to get reps right away. I have a hard time seeing him just withering away on the bench next year.
Yeah.
But I think he'll get involved. I mean, I think Derek Williams can start right away. I think Malik Muhammad could possibly do that, but I don't think that's likely. Derek Williams just is so versatile and he's so good. He is an SEC safety, and so he could take that boundary spot. You can end up playing some nickel if you want to slide like a Jalen Gilbo or Jahdae Barron over. God forbid you end up losing Barron during the offseason. I think that rumor's kind of died down, but just in case. I mean, Muhammad will compete with Gavin Holmes and Terrence Brooks for reps at field corner. He'll definitely be in the rotation. And I guess like the guy that immediately sticks out to me among the guys that can make an immediate impact on defense is going to be Anthony Hill. He's probably going to be starting at kind of a hybrid weak side linebacker position right away. Long term, I think he'll end up being in the spot that Jalen Ford is now. And then Cedric Baxter. I mean, God knows he'll be good next year. So I think those are some guys to watch. Sadir Mitchell could get some early reps up front. Again, God knows he's big enough.
Yeah.
So I think to me that's kind of the extent of the guys that will end up making an immediate impact. You could see a guy like Samaje Burrell competing for reps next year, and then just these plethora of edge rushers. Colton Bosick. Yeah, I should name him because him, Darian Gillette, if he recovers from injury, all these blue chips that you got among the linebackers and edge guys could be at least in the rotation. So
yeah,
that's kind of what I'm thinking.
I think it's. I agree with everything you're saying. I think it's interesting to look at. I mean, it speaks to the depth of talent with all the names you listed, because realistically, any one of the guys you said could play, meaningful snaps next year and probably be pretty competent doing so. I think the guy you mentioned, who I'll just harp on as well, Anthony Hill, I think it's probably the biggest shoe-in to come in and play meaningful snaps. I would be shocked if he's not starting. Losing Overshown, losing Tucker Dorsey, Jalen Ford hopefully returns. It looks like it's leaning that way, but still, Texas has had a gap in the middle, and it's got Hill's name on it. Hill is, he's built for it physically, and he's also a super instinctual, high IQ football player. So there's not like a lot that he's missing at this moment besides getting those reps against other players at this caliber of football, something that he's going to do as an early enrollee. So, yeah, Anthony Hill is going to, I think, go down as, one of the biggest flips, not just for Texas, but nationally, the whole class, because he's going to end up being a 3 or 4 year starter, depending how long he sticks around. I think he's going to be very impactful. So I'm excited for him to get to campus.
He's just so good.
Yeah.
He's going to be fun to watch. I mean, we're going to have plenty of time, too, to dive into how these guys fit and what impacts they will make. To some degree, it's still a little unclear, like, in terms of, like, depth chart, what that's going to look like, because, I mean, we're 2 portal commitments into a cycle that's probably going to have 8 or 10 guys added. And we're not, I'd assume that we're probably going to get maybe let's say 2 more high school recruits added to the 2023 class. So we're going to have more portal entrants also after the bowl game. I think we've already seen most of the departures take place, but there's probably going to be a few more. So I don't want to dig too deep into like the roster projected depth chart for 2023, but let's kind of take a look forward on what's next for the 2023 class. I mentioned some names to watch earlier: Jelani McDonald and Tyler Scott. I would love to get Tyler Scott in the 2023 class for a 3-star. He's about as good as it gets, like this lengthy, just ball hawking 6'2" defensive back that can play more than likely boundary corner or field safety. But he's got some scheme versatility to him. Jelani McDonald, I think, is going to be like, if he joins the 2023 class, I think he's the kind of fits the mold of a developmental prospect more so than anyone else among the linebackers, because he's an athlete right now, not a pure fit in any one of the linebacker positions, but really good athlete, got insane physical tools, high ceiling. Whenever you're a TCU or Oklahoma State eval early on, you usually have something that you can fit in the Big 12 or even in the SEC, because that's probably when he would get his initial snaps. I mean, obviously, I want Deuce Robinson. I don't. he landing the number 1 tight end along with 3 other top players at their position in this class would be just, a dream for the Longhorns. And so that's the top name to watch. Let me do a little research on this name, because I thought there was a Stanford defensive line decommit that is still unsigned. That I've heard some stuff about. Let me do some research on that. If you have any names that you wanted to mention that Texas could still get that are out there.
So I think you hit on the big three, which is Scott McDonald and Deuce Robinson. I want to ask you, just because if you go through the Horns 24/7, you see kind of names that Texas is warm with. A guy we haven't talked about in a while, MHP, Mikael Harrison Pilot. He's like a Houston lock at this point, or what's the noise over there? Because I haven't heard him mentioned in Texas circles in a while, but I've noticed that he still hasn't announced anything yet.
Yeah, the last that I know of Mikael Harrison Pilot, I'm pretty sure he's still. Let me check on that, but I'm pretty sure he's still leaning toward TCU if he didn't already sign with them. I don't think he signed with them or committed to them today, though.
Yeah, he's announcing on January 7th. So unless he's signed and hasn't said anything yet, that's yet to come out. So
yeah,
it seemed like Texas had some steam maybe like back in August that kind of dropped off. But I mean, that is a name that the staff has familiarity with. That if they think they want to push that way, maybe gives it a late push.
Yeah,
I don't think so, but it's certainly a name that intrigued me. But yeah, I don't think that there's a whole lot. Like you mentioned, a lot of this damage is going to be done in the transfer portal. I think, what was it? Is it a 22-man? It's a 22-man class.
Yep.
And yeah, at 8 to 10 transfers, it gives you 30, 32. That's a perfect number. And I think Texas adds one or two more in the freshman class, and the rest are coming from the portal.
That's probably a good tally there. I mean, I look at it this way. Yeah, this Stanford guy already flipped somewhere. I don't know where I was hearing that earlier today. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I'll check here in a second on MHP, but last I heard he was pretty heavy TCU lean. I believe he was one of their final spots in the class because TCU has had all sorts of momentum on the recruiting trail lately. He's still. I'd say Houston still has a chance there, but it looks like TCU is probably the favorite. So the two areas that I would point to that are of potential need for the Longhorns, and I mean, it's always fun to do some digging on who else is still out there or what movement there could be. Maybe there's some coaching movement, even if it's positional coaches in the next couple months. They could free up like some blue chips at a position of need. I would say defensive line because like we lost Dylan Spencer and really didn't find anyone to replace him. So I would say defensive line is going to be the first one. And then second is still going to be in the secondary. Wide receiver and tight end are still a possibility, but you do still have DeAndre Moore, who technically could still end up in this class. I think at this point I would probably put money on Louisville if I absolutely had to, but I've heard that Georgia could technically be back in the running here too. I don't really know. I think he's taking best offer available at this point, whether that be side something like NIL or just where he feels like the fit is best. So, but Deuce Robinson's still out there for tight end, but those are going to be the positions to watch. And I think the first position up is the first one I mentioned, defensive line. So that's probably where I would do most of my digging, or where I will do most of my digging first. So are there any positions that I missed?
You're talking about in regards to what we need to add?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I think a big-time edge player. We're going to say it every single football pod we hop on, but we need a guy who can come in. I mean, Barron Sorrell is kind of second half of the season shown that he can be, like a double-digit sack guy, but someone with a lot of proven production would be huge. And, just another impact wide receiver. You can pair next to Worthy and hopefully Nair. I think Jonte Cook is going to force his way in that room. You mentioned maybe like fourth or fifth in the rotation. I think that's a perfect spot for him. But for him to wind up at 4th or 5th, I think that means Texas adds a guy like Dominic Lovett or someone of that caliber, because you look down the depth chart and there are some intriguing names. Savion Red, who's apparently had some great bowl practices, but it is thinner than you would like. So I hope Texas adds someone that can really compete for starting reps at the wideout position.
Yeah, regardless if it's by way of the 2023, or whether it's by way of like high school recruits in the 2023 class or portal guys, I have a hard time seeing us adding less than two more. It's just getting 2 signees, at least among the wideouts, and you're not getting Kamori and Pimpton, so that you don't kind of get that hybrid guy. So that's still going to be one to watch. I'm not going to be able to dig through the guys still available quick enough to give any names at the moment, because most of the guys that decommitted from somewhere today were just flips as usual. But it is interesting when you look at it, because like this was kind of a weird. It was kind of a weird day when you think of the NIL era. You think of a lot of guys that are, just kind of going from smaller schools that were like senior evals, then ended up flipping to bigger schools, like a Pimpton from Vanderbilt to LSU, even though they're both in the SEC, one obviously bigger than the other in the way of the football program. But you still got some big names out there that flipped from like Oregon to Washington or Florida to UCF. There was a 4-star edge that did that today. So I think we still could be in for a little bit of movement too. And so that I'm just going to say to watch what's going on there. And I will continue to have plenty of coverage on the side of guys that I can personally find that, could be good ideas of fits for Texas, whether in reality or just in theory. Okay. Let's kind of turn the attention here to portal. We'll start with, we haven't really talked about Ryan Sanborn at all, so we can kind of just take a look at special teams for a second. But, let's kind of round out just like talking portal here. So what was it? Last week picked up Ryan Sanborn. Today picked up Gavin Holmes, Wake Forest transfer corner. We kind of talked about it at the beginning of the show, but what are your thoughts there so far?
Yeah, I think Sanborn's a big addition. We thought Isaac Pearson from Pro Cricket Australia was going to be the next guy. Had some struggles early with Shanks and with not being able to hold on to the football, and then was immediately benched for Daniel Trejo, who kind of a diamond in the rough find by Jeff Banks. I think Jeff Banks did it again. This Sanborn is obviously not a diamond in the rough, one of the best punters in the Pac-12, top graded by PFF. But we saw it in the Michael Dixon era. Having a punter who can change games is absolutely huge. I don't think Sanborn is that level of punter, but he's certainly very competent with experience. Little jab at Stanford, but experience punting the ball, to say the least. So I think that's bigger than people will make it out to be just because of the title of punter. But huge need, knocked off the bucket list pretty early into the transfer portal cycle. And then Gavin Holmes, going to come in and compete for that field corner spot. We think Ryan Watts obviously has one side of the field locked down. And I think, like I said about offensive line, the best way to solve open issues on the team is to throw as many players you can at the problem, see who wins it in camp. And while I think there are, better DBs in this transfer portal class, I think Holmes is a very competent player. You mentioned you had a tweet, very good at defending the deep ball. So I think he can come in long, lengthy, and compete, especially against Big 12 receivers. And I think so far 2 for 2, can't be disappointed with either signee, and got to expect a lot more, though, going forward.
Yeah, this is a good pickup for special teams, just because from like a consistency perspective, I think Sanborn's going to bring a lot more of that to the table. If there was like a Trejo, I don't know how Isaac Pearson would have done. He was benched after like 2 punts, one single punt. And so no shade to Daniel Trejo. It was nice to have him as a pickup because I think he was probably an upgrade from what Pearson would have been. we don't really know there. I'll trust Jeff Banks' judgment on that. But I mean, he was probably the worst punter we've had, and at least as long as I've been covering the team, it goes back 5-6 years. So it's nice to get that pickup. I did a deep dive on him, and I'll post the link below if for the very small margin of y'all that are punting fans. But I kind of did a deep dive on some of his numbers because I kind of wanted to understand, okay, why is he the highest graded Pac-12 punter when he's got like the lowest net average or lowest yards per punt, or at least bottom half in the Pac-12 each of the last 4 seasons. And you kind of start understanding, okay, like technically he's pretty good. Also, you look at where he was punting from. Stanford plays the field position battle a lot, and he was just on the field a lot. One of my favorite stats that I found was he was the only, I believe it was the only Power 5 punter to have more than 20 punts down inside the 20 without a single touchback. That in and of itself is pretty impressive. He's had more than 40 down inside the punts down inside the 20-yard line in the last 2 seasons and only 1 touchback. So he's accurate. He helps you flip the field, and he's not going to give a whole lot of wasted yards on touchbacks. So that's big to have. And like I said, just the consistency that he brings to the table, where you're not going to have, like, Trejo had some shanked punts. Sometimes the placement was poor. He wasn't very good at pinning teams deep. So from all of those perspectives, I think you're getting an upgrade in Sanborn. As far as you're looking at it for Holmes, we've talked a lot about him, and you mentioned defending the deep ball. I've done some digging on that. He had 19 targets on the deep ball during the regular season. Deep ball, considering anything of at least 20 yards. And one, I believe, was one of those targets was actually just kind of down the seam between the numbers. That one was against Clemson. I got to go back and watch the film on that to be sure. I might be crossing wires on that, but he only gave up three receptions. I actually downloaded the data of every deep ball target for the year and the depth of target on those deep balls, and the average depth of target was somewhere about 24 yards. His was about 28.7. So, like, it's not just that, like, he was getting tested on these outside throws. He was getting tested all over the place on the deep ball. And he's made some plays. Again, I'll link the article below if you want a more in-depth breakdown and going through the film. I picked out a few GIFs throughout the regular season, specifically from the Louisville and the Duke games. Watched a good bit of the NC State and Clemson games too. And so I like his game. He's really good at keeping the play either in front of him or at least tracking the deep ball. You know, I hear from a lot of Texas fans that, like, why aren't the corners getting their head turned around on the deep ball? And I guess we'll see if this is specifically a Texas issue, because he did a really good job of adjusting and, you know, turning back and timing the deep ball well. He plays it technically very well. Good ball skills, good timing. The weaknesses for him, I think, if he ever gets drawn and, you know, has to work kind of against a quicker slot wide out between the numbers, that tends to be a little bit outside of his range right now from watching the high school film and the limited reps that he did get. I was looking back, the last 4 touchdowns he's allowed in pass coverage, 2 of them came out of the slot, whereas only around 15 to 20% of his targets came out of the slot. So that tends to be a little bit of a monkey that he'll need to get off his back. And the main thing is the elephant in the room in terms of his issues, just pass play tackling or just tackling in general. I don't know if it's just poor approach and angles or if it's just strength. I don't know, but he has 15 missed tackles in the last 3 seasons and 45 combined tackles. So that's not the missed tackle rate you want to see. That is well above the Power 5 average for even a cornerback. And I think a lot of Texas fans know that we've had issues tackling at the field corner spot before, including with Deshaun Jameson down the stretch this season. That's going to be a spot where he has to improve. Overall, though, I like his game. I like what he brings to the table. He still, like I said, still got 2 years of eligibility remaining, so he's still got a little bit of growth left, I do believe. Yeah, let's. I guess let's kind of take a look now. Now, we did 2 in-depth portal shows, but knowing that we have Gavin Holmes now, what are kind of the next? And you can name some names with it, but if you see Texas, or what positionally do you want Texas to land next? Like 1 or 2 positions?
Yeah, I mentioned it, but I think it's got to be on the edge. We talked about at the beginning of the show that the edge position is starting to fill out in the freshman class the past 2 cycles, but are those guys ready to play and compete in a major way? Justice Finkley, I think, will take that big step next year, but you need as much depth as possible. We saw it at least on the interior, how Texas just rolled defensive linemen in and out, and having fresh bodies really wears down an offensive line that keeps the same 5 guys on the field the whole game. So I think we can want to try to do the same thing out on the edge. Unfortunately, some of the edge names that we mentioned are starting to be crystal ball to schools that aren't in Austin. Josiah Stewart from Coastal Carolina was one guy that we, you specifically, were really breaking down and kind of sold me on him. Unfortunately, he's now headed to Michigan. But I mean, there are still some good names in the portal. Truman Jones from Harvard. I haven't seen a whole lot of him, but he's one of the higher ranked guys. And prospects from Harvard are always interesting because you never really know how to compare them with, the competition they play against. But Clayton Smith, Oklahoma, and Donnell Harris, Texas A&M, are 2 guys just based off where they come from you think may have ties to Austin. But yeah, some of the names that we talked about originally are kind of already off the table, which I don't know if that's bad on the staff or, the cycle's just moving so quickly, what to make of that. But I think the next signee you're going to want to see is going to be an edge.
Yeah, I mean, edge is a position of need where it's like that's why when I saw a guy like Josiah Stewart or Andre Carter, I actually don't know if Carter's still available, but I don't think they're looking into him at all. Where it's like I would like them to jump on that a little bit sooner, but I know you're trying to round out the 2023 class. We'll see if there's any guys headed into the portal. Tunisia Dele today committed to Michigan State too, so that's a guy that they were actually looking at one point off the board. So that to me is always a little bit of kind of deflates the tires a little bit for that position. Okay, so let's leave it here because I don't want this video to run all too long. Let's just do one bold prediction. One bold prediction for the 2023 class, whether that be portal or high school recruiting. Before National Signing Day in February, because I think most of the portal will be figured out at that point outside of the spring window.
So I'll give a bold prediction. I think you're pretty locked in on everything in regards to that. So my bold prediction will be in regards to our class specifically. I think Derek Williams is going to come in halfway through the season, is going to earn a starting job. He's going to force his way onto the field, and he's going to be a 3-year player that gets drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. I mean, from the film that I've seen on him, which, isn't much more than Huddle and YouTube highlights, he flies around the field. Hard hitter, super instinctual player. You mentioned it. I think it's a good kind of term to use, but he is an SEC type of safety. Physical guy, but also has the speed to keep up. I think he's going to be strong in the box and in coverage. Can add some weight to his frame. I think he's listed at 180, 185 right now. So I don't think he's going to be an early enrollee, which will stunt the fact that it'll stunt the chance that he can start right away. But I think halfway through the season, like I mentioned, after he this staff sees him on the field in the limited roles he has in the first couple of games, he's going to force his way onto the field. He could end up being one of the best players in this class, and I think he has a 3-year guy written all over him. So I'm really excited about Derek Williams, and I'm excited that he stuck around because that was one name today that we thought had a real chance of flipping to LSU and not being included in this class.
Yeah, and then Miami was making a late run at him too. So, yeah, that kind of worried me given how much momentum they had on the trail lately. We've already done so many bold predictions for the portal. That was a good one. That was a good one for you. I'm going to say that my bold prediction for the portal, because I don't know how many more bold predictions I have on the recruiting trail, us landing Deuce Robinson is a really, really great thing to say right now. It'd be nice. That's my fun bold prediction. My more bold prediction would be that we get whether it be Dominic Lovett or someone else. I'm not going to mention his name specifically, anyone's name specifically. I'm not saying that I have any intel there. That's not what I'm trying to hint at. But that we get a slot wideout that can compete with Jordan Whittington and Xavier Worthy, but that Whittington still comes back. And so I guess I'm trying to kind of play off what you were saying earlier, where it's like, yeah, Jordan or Jonte Cook is the 4th or 5th guy in the wide receiver room. That means we probably landed someone. So hopefully that is the case, because I think we're gonna have a good number of wideouts to get in the portal after bowl season is over. And I'm not panicking at the position right now for sure. I'd like to see a little bit more movement though at edge and defensive line. So. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I had for this. I mean, it's been a really busy signing day, and we got UT basketball coming up here in about 30 minutes after we're done recording. So
I would say
nonstop day.
The last thing I have, I think it would be remiss to not mention Arch on the class of 2023 show. I think it really, if you look at it, he's one of the, according to 24/7, one of the best 8 prospects of all time, the second best prospect that the University of Texas has ever signed since recruiting rankings have been a thing. He helped bring this class together. While I don't think we're going to see a ton of them on the field, I hope we don't see a ton of them on the field in 2023. This class has the Arch imprint on it, signing a running back from Florida, an edge from Hawaii, multiple players from Hawaii, and closing on Anthony Hill. Many different commitments in this class have the Arch stamp on it, and so I think we'd be remiss to go without mentioning him. And then another thing is, as fans that are listening to this, Texas signed 6 players in the top 50. Only Alabama signed more. So while the grass might be greener, it's not greener in too many other places right now. So even if we don't end up landing Deuce Robinson, DeAndre Moore doesn't end up coming to Austin, I think you can say that this haul was pretty solid. And it's hard to complain when you literally have one of the best classes in the country, 3rd ranked, and 6 guys in the top 50. So including the number 1 player in the nation. So I'll just leave it at that. It's always easy to quickly, turn and say who's next, who's coming next. But I think looking at the guys you have to be pretty happy with this going forward, both the staff and fans.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, Arch is a foundational piece, and a lot of this class doesn't come together unless he commits in late June and signs early and enrolls early to get all these guys rallied together. And we got a good group of early enrollees. That's going to be really nice to watch in spring ball. There's going to be a lot of young talent out there. So, yeah, it's good that you mentioned him, because that would have been bad if we had done that in this entire thing. I guess I'm starting to get kind of tired. Yeah, but I think that's all I got. It's been a good signing day. There hasn't been a ton of drama, so that is a little bit refreshing. So anyway, for Shane Black, Andrew Miller at hook'emheadlines.com, that's pretty much it for early National Signing Day 2022. Hook 'em.